The Pittsburgh Steelers are looking for a wide receivers coach following the departure of Frisman Jackson. And there's one name that everybody's talking about, and I might be here to give you some bad news on that name. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackmine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers announced that Frisman Jackson will be moving on from the team. They are now without a wide receivers coach heading into 2024, a name that personally I believed was going to stick around. But what it shows is that this team is going to continue to make coaching changes and that it is going to build a staff around their new offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. I believe that's a good thing. For one, this wasn't Matt Canada's staff. This was Mike Tomlin's staff. And therefore, it wasn't trusted. It wasn't a staff that you looked at and said, the Steelers have full confidence in Matt Canada. He's their guy, and he is allowed to build their staff. With Arthur Smith, it kind of feels like the Steelers are going to build a staff, or at least parts of a staff, that are Arthur Smith's staff. That this is his choosing, his hire, his belief system, and he can build company around him to create a successful offense. I think that shows a lot of faith in their new offensive coordinator, which means that they really believe in this guy and also believes or shows that they believe that he's big enough to handle that situation. That's a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Frisman Jackson was a name that I thought was a bit surprising. Didn't see that one coming. I thought of all the coaches on the offensive staff, he was the one that helped George Pickens develop in 2 years. Diontae Johnson has settled with much less drop issues and has turned himself into a really good 1-2 receiver, depending on the team and the situation that he is in. He has helped Allen Robinson do something. He has continued to work with Calvin Austin. I thought he showed plenty of good. But the Steelers are moving on. They're building a new offensive staff, and I think that's a good thing. So far, the only name that I have been told of that will or is set to interview with the Steelers is Zach Azzanni, wide receivers coach for the New York Jets. Outside of that, I do not know more names that are coming in, but there is one name that reigns supreme amongst the fan base that immediately was shouted from the bleachers and brought up by every radio station and everybody with the pen and a paper and a keypad saying, hey, maybe this is the Steelers' next wide receivers coach. That name is Hines Ward. And maybe that does make some sense. Maybe if the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at this and saying, we want a guy who's going to teach hard-nosed football, who is going to hold guys accountable, who is going to come in here and teach the Steelers way to George Pickens, who Mike Tomlin has admitted is a work in progress off the field, a work in progress when it comes to his attitude and his maturity. Diontae Johnson, who has developed into a leader, but maybe can take a little bit more of a step in 2024. And Calvin Austin, who's a young, developing, influential guy. Maybe that's their train of thought, is let's go get Hines Ward to come in here and be a role model for these guys. But I don't know if that's the right move. And I don't know if I'm on board with the Hines Ward move as much as everybody else. And I don't know if the Steelers are going to be on board with the Hines Ward move as much as everybody else either. Why? Because I don't think they're looking for somebody to come in here and be a role model. I think they're looking for somebody to come in here and take on a pretty prominent role and to develop wide receivers and turn them into Justin Jeffersons or Julio Joneses or A.J. Browns or whatever elite wide receiver over the years you would like these guys to turn into. That's where I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers stand. I'm not saying Hines Ward isn't that guy or doesn't have that experience. He's been a wide receivers coach in the NCAA. He was an offensive assistant for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has NFL coaching experience. He has head coaching experience in the XFL. The guy has a resume, and a resume probably good enough to land him a job in the NFL if that's where he chooses to be. With what role, I do not know, but that is where I stand, and I believe that he has the credentials to be a wide receivers coach in the professional football league, in the National Football League. With the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm not quite sure. I believe that they should use this as an opportunity to shoot for the stars again, to go and get somebody that Arthur Smith believes can develop these guys into true superstars. No questions asked. And I think that with names like Arthur Smith, I think names like Mike Tomlin, you look at this and you say they can hold their players accountable. Arthur Smith has head coaching experience. He has great culture everywhere he goes. Everybody talks about how much they love this guy and respect this guy and how he holds a certain standard in a building when it comes to everything and all the intangibles. He's not a guy that's going to sit around and let George Pickens get away with some of the things that the Steelers were hoping George Pickens didn't do last season. He's not going to sit around and let whoever or whomever talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers or create some drama or this or that. None of that will happen. I think Arthur Smith holds a much tighter grip than Matt Canada does on an offense. I think that's very easy to assume, and he should be able to control that. Use the wide receiver position to get somebody who's going to develop these guys into superstars. Maybe that is Hines Ward, but maybe it's not. And if you hire Hines Ward, I don't believe you're hiring him for the right reasons. On top of that, you have to look at some history here. And some history is rough. Hines Ward has said things about George Pickens. Hines Ward has said things about Deontay Johnson. Hines Ward has said things about the culture of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and his comments have been known. And he's been a guy that's been on podcasts and done interviews, and his words have circulated, and they have circulated to the masses. And I just don't think that that's a name that walks into the building and George Pickens, who kept receipts and said, hey, look, I kept receipts, is going to be very pleased with having coaching him. I just don't think that that's a risk worth taking. And quite frankly, when it comes to an offensive coordinator or a quarterback or this or that, there are a million different positions that are above a wide receiver when it comes to the pecking order and who you look for and what decisions you make because of certain other positions. When it comes to a wide receivers coach, you are so far down that totem pole that you do not make any decisions around your wide receivers coach. You do not try to avoid, oh, well, George Pickens is an issue. He doesn't really like me, but I'm the coach. You don't hold that ground. Not as a wide receivers coach. As a head coach, as an offensive coordinator maybe, as a quarterback definitely, but not as a wide receivers coach. And I think just because of that, it is not a match made in heaven. And I think they will find their match made in heaven. I think there are names out there. And I don't know if Zach Azzani is that ideal guy. I don't know if they're looking at him just because Garrett Wilson has been a stud the last 2 seasons, and they have been able to do things with him that they hope they could do with George Pickens or Deontay Johnson for that matter, or whoever. I don't know if there are more coming. I don't know if a guy like Tom Arth is going to come in here and become a wide receivers coach and a passing game coordinator. I have no idea. And I would expect more interviews to come, and I would expect that coaching tree to get filled. But for right now, those who sit around and say, Hines Ward is the guy, he probably isn't. And that's okay, because it's no jab and nothing wrong with Hines Ward. I think he did all the right things and has had one great career as a coach, and I hope it continues, and I expect it to continue. And him saying things as a former player should have been said, especially in the moments that he said it. But I just don't think he's the fit in Pittsburgh. And I think they're going to find a better fit. Even if the fans aren't as excited and the media isn't as excited and the radio hosts aren't as excited about the guy who isn't named Hines Ward.